You're listening to the Turn Autism Around podcast, episode number 213. Today, we are going to talk to Lisa Candera, who is a mom of a 15-year-old with autism. She is also a lawyer and, most importantly, a life coach to other moms. She has a podcast and a website and one-to-one coaching through theautismmomcoach.com. I loved this episode. Lisa is so funny and she's so insightful on so many different areas. So let's get to this really great interview with Lisa Candera. Lisa, it is so nice to meet you today. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I was checking out your website and getting more and more excited for this. So we are going to talk all about, coaching autism parents and getting them into the right mindset to be the best people for themselves and also caregivers for their child. But before we get into your expertise and your areas of interest, let's talk about your fall into the autism world.
Sure. So my son was diagnosed around the age of 2. And so, prior to that, it's a story that you've heard before, progressing, as expected. Around 18 months, things started to, he was getting just more and more escalated, more and more frustrated. And you could really see the frustration and that he was trying to communicate something, but he wasn't. And so I wasn't really thinking anything really, at the time, but I did, to his pediatrician, I said, he's not talking and he's really frustrated. And, I got the response that you get, like, first time mom, he's a boy, the whole thing. I'm like, yeah, that's great. And he's banging his head against the wall. So that to me seems a little off. So can we take a look at this? And from there, we got, a speech therapist, intervened. We got early intervention. We had, signs of red flags, and then eventually getting a formal diagnosis of autism at the age of 2. And so from there, my son was, he matriculated into our local public school where he was, supported with one-on-one aids, and that lasted until COVID, essentially. And so
Wow.
yeah, and so he was doing pretty well. I mean, there were always challenges along the way, but we got through them. By the time COVID hit, his anxiety was already tracking up. And with the loss of the support and the virtual learning and just that disconnect between being at home and being in school at the same time, he would say things like, I'm in 2 places at once, but nowhere. And he would have what I would
think a lot of us felt like that.
right? And he would just have panic attacks every morning. He would open up that computer and look at the screen and just see like all the, like, did you check in the homework assignment, and just, that sensory experience. And he would panic. And then there was no teacher to provide that reassurance that he was always seeking. And, I was useless, right? Because you're not the teacher, you don't know, right? And
Your son is how old now? 15?
He's 15.
So COVID hit around.
He was 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, right, exactly. So I call it was like the perfect storm. It was anxiety, it was hormones, it was, COVID, the loss of supports. And then with that, the emergence of a new diagnosis of OCD. And so that really for us was the perfect storm. And which resulted in, he's no longer in a mainstream public school. He's in a therapeutic environment with many more supports. And we just spent 3 months living in Rhode Island while he was in an intensive OCD program. And so it's so interesting because I remember when he was 2 and wanting to do everything I could possibly do as quickly as I could possibly do it, because that's what you're told, right? And having no idea what to do, no idea if it would work, and just throwing it all against the wall. And then to find myself like 11 years later in the same position with the emergence of a new diagnosis. And then, autism and anything else just makes it complicated, right? There's no straightforward way. And so that's where we are now.
Okay. So in terms of where he falls on the autism spectrum, he can talk. He's conversational.
Oh yeah, he's what you would call high functioning for sure.
Okay.
Like, he's a kid that, you wouldn't know until you knew, right? And so like you start to have a conversation with him, and he might start looping on something. He might bring up the same thing over and over, that kind of thing. Like you might like detect it, but if he's in a really high state of anxiety due to his OCD, you're going to know something's up. You're just not going to know what.
Yeah. And I did do some shows, a podcast very early on high functioning and low functioning, and how within each child are their strengths and needs, and
Absolutely.
day to day, and depending on the situation and the environment and the other comorbid diagnoses, it can really look different. And that high functioning kids definitely have a lot more comorbid or co-occurring diagnoses like OCD. Have
Yeah.
you ever looked into PANS or PANDAS?
We did at some point, and that was ruled out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that's the other thing when you do have acute onset or worsening
Yep.
exacerbation of OCD and or tics, which my son had. Then the PANS could be looked at. And I did do a podcast interview with a PANS expert, which we can link in the show notes. But like you said, you have ruled that out. And so now it's a therapeutic environment. And I'm assuming there's medication also on board. I did.
Oh, there's medication.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it gets tricky because it's not just one medication and you're trying different things. I interviewed Dr. Michael Murray, who's Lucas's psychiatrist, who's also a dad of a son with autism. And we can link that in the show notes. It's all about medications and autism. And he's just really brilliant and really has done a lot for Lucas and so many kids locally. So I like to bring that up too, in case there's others out there that are struggling with OCD and autism.
Yeah, it's really complicated. And I mean, look, we've been treated at an autism hospital, and we were treated at Bradley, which is like one of like the, places in the country that you go for severe OCD. And what I was told straight out is autism is different, right? When it comes to autism and medication, like this is what we think the medication does. And then we see what it does in a child with autism. Like unfortunately, I feel like sometimes it's more art than science, but that is the way it goes. And then, but biochemistry and hormones, and you add all of that stuff in. And so the medication thing becomes it's a huge challenge.
Yeah. In the Dr. Murray episode, we talk about a Genomind test, which is there's Genomind and GeneSight, which is like a swab in the inside of your mouth. And then that shows which medications are better for a child or a person, no matter what the diagnoses are. And I know that has your son ever had one of those?
Yeah, we've done
and
it
that
all.
and that can really help, especially when you have a child that can't report side effects and can't, so it sounds like your son is definitely getting the best of the best. And I just wanted to like drip these things in because I know so many people struggling out there.
I think the best thing that the GeneSight test told us that my son was a very fast metabolizer. And so that was a helpful thing to understand in terms of like, getting the correct therapeutic dose with the medication.
Yeah.
It's all, it's really complicated when it comes to medications. And I always tell like parents, it's like, ultimately we're the experts on our children. We are the people with them day in and day out seeing the side effects. I was told repeatedly, no, this medicine would not cause X. I'm like, and I am keeping notes and here's what I'm seeing. So maybe it's not the medicine, but let's just see. Right? Let's just see.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. Okay. So, now let's talk about your transformation. So
Mm.
you are a practicing attorney and you now also provide one-to-one coaching for moms and maybe dads too. But how did you transform? You have a podcast, you are really getting into the the space of helping people virtually like I am. So how did you transform into that autism coach mom?
Yeah. So I think it's like with all things like autism and special needs, like um, you see a need and then you create it, right? And so for me, what happened is I got into, my son was 12 or 13 years old and he was transitioning. This is for as COVID was coming on, but he was going to be transitioning into middle school and his anxiety was tracking up. And I went to his middle school orientation for parents and I saw this middle school and how big it was and the changing schedules and all these different expectations. And I panicked. I was like, how am I going to get him through this? Like, I had been white knuckling it up to that point, and I was just like, holy crap, like, I work full time. How am I going to do this? And it was more from the emotional standpoint of managing the anxiety that I knew that he had, and he was having more of it. And so I was like, I need a better way of doing this. Like, I can't just keep white knuckling it. And I had tried therapy in the past, and it's fine. But for me, it's like, there was no mystery here as to why I was feeling anxious. And I wanted a better way of showing up in my life. And sometimes when I went to therapists, I spent a lot of time explaining autism to them or explaining our challenges. And I just was not, I just, that's not where I was. And so I had just happened to be listening to a podcast who was it was a lawyer podcast actually, but she was a life coach and I liked the tools. And so that's really how I came into it. And so I liked it so much. And I really found it helpful in my day to day life with my son and managing our own stuff that I just went full out. I'm like, okay, like let's get certified. And so then I got certified and just so I could understand the tools better myself. And then, I mean, there's such an unmet need in the community of autism parents. Like everything I see in terms of like parent support is really like how we can help our children. But it's like, but what about us? Right? Like BCBAs and like therapists, they get trained actually on emotional regulation and things like that when they are working with their clients. Well, our children are our clients in some respect, right? And we're with them day in and day out. And it's like, how do we support ourselves? And so I found so much benefit from these tools. And I just saw such a need in the community to help other moms that were going through the same thing. And hence the Autism Mom Coach was born.
Awesome. Who did you train under to become a certified life coach?
The Life Coach School.
Yeah, with Brooke Castillo. Love
Yeah.
that. Love
Yeah.
her. I will link her in the show notes. Really, I found her years ago through a podcast,
Mm.
and she really has a really unique model. I can compare it to a little bit, and I'm not an expert on either of these. I'm not a certified life coach through Brooke Castillo, but also the ACT, the
Yep.
acceptance and commitment therapy. Like I think those, like I had Jonathan Tarbuck's on that we can link in the show notes, like mindfulness. And I think the combination though, and your expertise as an autism mom, I'm actually really excited that you are trained through Brooke Castillo because I know
Well,
the model and I've used it. And maybe we can even at some point have you back on the show to actually go over the model
oh, that
because
would be awesome.
I
So
think that would be great.
I agree. And so I loved the model because, it's based on CBT therapy, right? Think, feel, act, right? That think, feel, act cycle is right in the middle of it. But it was like, I felt like my life was happening to me and I had no power and like it had been hijacked by autism. This gave me another viewpoint in. But in addition to studying the model, I have studied ACT ACT therapy, through the OCD, and, the ERP, counseling that my son got.
And what's ERP stand for?
Exposure response.
Okay. And
Um,
CBT is cog
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't like to use all these acronyms
Yes,
because
yes.
it's a lot,
It,
but the point is that the model created by Brooke Castillo is a very layman's term,
yes.
and it can be used for anybody with any struggle. Like if you're a BCBA out there, I mean, you could use it for weight loss, you could use it for, if you're feeling lonely or depressed or getting in fights with your husband or whatever, you can use it to basically coach yourself.
Exactly. It's a self-coaching model. And so, like I said, I did study the model, and I'm one of, I'm in that program, but, in studying the model, I've also found that there was another piece missing for me as an autism mom. So it's great to be like, oh, like your thoughts create your feelings. So just change your thoughts and you'll feel better. That shit doesn't work. And Brooke does not teach that at all. But I needed something more to help me regulate myself. Like when my son literally escalated, yelling, screaming, when the heat was turned up, how could I regulate my own nervous system? And so from that, I also, I'm in an immersive course with Deb Dana studying polyvagal theory to be polyvagal informed as a coach. And this really helps you understand where you are in your nervous system states. Am I activated? Because when I'm activated, when I'm in a fight flight, I only have access to certain thoughts. I only have access to certain ways of reacting. And once I can notice that in myself, it's like, how can I anchor myself back to some more regulation and safety? Because once I'm able to do that for myself, I can offer a co-regulating presence to my child who is also escalating. So in my practice, what I like to teach my clients is when they go high, we go low, or at the very least, like we hover around neutral. And while, the thought feel act cycle, that can help you, but sometimes it's like you also need another way in, because this is happening in your body. Your body is reacting to, a sense of like, danger or, threat. And it's like, how can you help yourself in those moments to like bring some grounding to yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. So important. So you say on your website, and your website is theautismmomcoach.com. And you say on your website that you are a single mom, and, we have a lot of single moms here listening. But we also have a lot of couples.
Mhm.
So in your practice as a life coach, and as your experience as a single mom, what are the unique challenges that, single parents have, single moms and particularly?
Yeah, I mean, so it's interesting because I have single moms and I have couples in my, moms who are married in my practice. And I would say, one of the challenges I see, I'll start actually with my married couples and me also when I was married, is the people not being on the same page. Sometimes that can be difficult, right? Like one parent has one way of responding to a behavior and another parent has another way. And so, and then when both parents are kind of elevated, right, trying to broker like what that's going to look like, which is really hard because like when you're in an elevated state, when you're in a fight flight state, you're not listening like for other people, like, right, you're not available for it. And so one of the things that I work with my couple clients on is like how you can communicate wants and needs when you're in a regulated state. So that means some planning. That means before shit hits the fan, you're talking about this stuff, right? And so what my biggest challenge for myself is, like, one of the easiest things about being a single parent is I get to make all the decisions. One of the hardest things about being a single parent is I get to make all the decisions, right? It's like that idea, and I have felt this so many times of like not having anyone to hold it with, these
Yeah.
huge responsibilities, medication, hospitalizations, out of district placements. That's And so what I teach my clients, single moms, married moms, is that when you make a decision, how you can have your own back, how you can commit to supporting yourself through that process, no matter what. Because so many of my clients, and I think this too, is like there's a right or wrong decision. And it's like, well, how do you know it's right or wrong? You don't. You're just making a decision based on what you know now, your best information. And your job is to commit that in the future, you're not going to go back in time and slap the shit out of yourself because, oh, it didn't work out, right? Like you really have to commit to having and supporting yourself, because we make so many decisions in this journey. And that if we are always undermining, always doing that to ourselves, we erode our own confidence and our own ability to make decisions.
Mm, yeah, I love that. And there are so many decisions, even without autism in the
Oh,
picture,
yeah. Yeah.
and every single decision will make will change the trajectory of your life. But then when you add autism and then, COVID and OCD, and it can get quite overwhelming. But I like what you said about, like, don't second guess yourself. Don't constantly be beating yourself up like I shoulda, woulda, coulda, because it's like you got to move forward. And if that doesn't work, you know, take data. And in fact, when you were talking,
Exactly.
trying to convince the doctors that the medication was having side effects that they weren't, aware of or weren't seeing, is I have a system, and I talk about it in my book and a couple places, and I have a short video blog, which I want to link in the show notes. But it's basically taking a physical calendar. So I just got my 2023 calendar a couple weeks ago, and we keep track of medication changes. We keep track of any sleep irregularities, any behavior problems, even slight
Yep.
agitation, and doctor's appointments. And I literally bring this physical calendar with me to doctor's appointments. And because of that, we also know that Lucas needs allergy shots. He's on his over 10th year of allergy shots, because we know that his
Yeah.
behaviors can go up. We know that he's a rapid metabolizer of Inderol, which is he's on for fight or flight. So he goes into fight mode. I actually, since I've been a little kid, have passed out from pain and stuff like that. So we're a bad combination. Like, thank God we got Lucas's major problem behaviors, down
Right. Right.
zero, especially his aggression to zero, because I'm like, he's going to physically hurt me and I'm going to pass out and die.
Well, it's so funny you say that about the calendar, because like I said, I'm an attorney, and I don't, for years I was, I was doing white collar, internal investigations, or I worked for the government, and I did investigations for them too. And so the lifeblood of any investigation was a chronology. And so I literally have a chronology on my own child, like date of appointment, what the person said, what happened, right? And so when I'm talking to these doctors and I'm like scrolling through, I'm like, listen, I'm hearing you and I'm seeing this data. So let's talk.
Yes. Yes. Cool. All right. So on your website, you have three it's a very good website, actually.
Yeah.
But three do you wonder whether you are doing the right things or giving enough support to your neurodivergent child? So we talked a little bit about that, like when your children are very little, even with my approach and my book and courses and stuff, I'm like, it's really great if you can take action immediately at the first signs and start turning things around as best as possible. But it's also never too late. But, how do you support moms who feel like, am I doing enough? Am I doing the right things?
Yeah. So I like to back it up with them and just be like, of course of course that's what you're thinking. Right. And of course, and so it's like, you're in a fear response, right? You are being hyper vigilant. you are trying, you're trying to protect yourself. You're trying to protect your child. And so your mind is just going to everything I can possibly do. And what I say to them is, when will you know it's enough? Right? Like, when will you know? And it's like, well, and sometimes what the answer is, it's like, well, when they catch up or when they're normal. Right. And so it's let's just get that out on the table. Right. I was like, but what if the goal, right, isn't right? Like, it's like, what is the goal here? And so for some parents, it's like, I want them to be on par with like their neurotypical peers. And it's like, okay, but let's just like unwrap that. Like, they're not neurotypical, right? And so like being like real, not, I don't want to say realistic, like in downplaying it, but it's like, you're putting a lot of pressure on all of these things that you're doing to create these certain outcomes for you. And you're not going to like, that's just going to drive you crazy. Right. And so like, I really just tried to talk to them about like, what's the next right thing for your child? Like, what do they need right now? And how can you provide that? Right. And it's like, that's all you really can do. Right. Like, it's like, you can try like lots and lots of things all at once, but like that's most likely going to bombard your child. It's going to overwhelm them. And so it's like, of course you feel this way. You are afraid that you are behind. You are afraid that there is something wrong, that there's something to catch up on. Like, what if you can just slow that down and just focus on what you're doing? Because I find that when parents do that, they actually get more results than when they're sort of harried and they're trying to like, let's do this and let's do that. And like, and they're just consuming and consuming. And like, it's like, it's not sort of landing as much.
Mhm. Yeah. And they're spending night after night, going over the internet. And we
Yes.
have actually an episode coming up in the next week or two with Ruth, who just joined my online course maybe 2 months ago, but she told me that she listened to every single one of my podcasts. I was like, what?
You're like, I haven't done that.
Over 200 podcasts,
Mm.
over 1 million downloads, and she's listened to every single one of my podcasts. And she told me that right after she joined my course, and she has a 5-year-old. And I was like, you have to get out of the quote unquote sea of free.
Yeah.
And start taking like action, one step by step, because you can spend a lot of time, floating around and questioning, and,
Absolutely.
even like medications and placement. You don't want to try all of these things at the same time. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, try something, give it a good try, take good data, and see if it's working. If it's working, it will motivate you to keep going in that direction.
That's such a like, and I talk to my clients about that all the time. Constraint, right? Like, it's the opposite of what we've, I think especially after with the diagnosis, it's like, do as much as you can, as fast as you can. But, it's like, the fact is, it's neuroplasticity is for life. Right. And so like, constraining to like, what's working now, what's helpful now, right? And going at it, I feel for me has been more productive than trying to throw so many things at my son, because he gets overwhelmed and then he shuts down. He's like, nope, not performing. Sorry. Like,
yeah. So also on your website, you have a statement. Do you live in fear of your child's future? How do you pronounce that word? Catastrophizing. Okay. I'm like, that's a tough word. Catastrophizing about what happens to them when they are older and bigger, when they fall off the services cliff, or when you are no longer around to protect them. And I know this is like a huge fear.
I actually have a podcast episode on this. I think it's called I Need to Live Forever. And so this is one of those, like, what I find with parents is like when I'm talking to them, especially about their triggers, like, what their child's behaviors, it's like, you're never just dealing with the behavior, because what I see is like, well, if he's doing this when he's 5, what's it going to be like when he's 10 or 15? I mean, is he ever going to live like by himself? And like, what happens when I die? Like, So like they're on the playground and like Charlie won't play with like Abby. And now it's like, well, he's going to be alone forever and I'm going to be dead. And so what I really teach my clients is like, okay, like recognizing like that's your soundtrack. That's where your mind is going and redirecting it because there's literally no upside to that. Like I've never seen a parent who did that. And was like, you know what? I'm going to go create a special needs trust right now in my will. Like, no, they're just spinning in their heads. And so that's one of the things that I like to, it's like, okay, listen, if that's an issue and you want to talk about that and there are steps that you can take, we can go there, but you're not available for that right now because you are spinning and you're not like, with no good outcome. And so that's the thing. It's like for all the time that we as parents wish that we have, and we say we don't have any time, if we took the time, if we if we could we could create time for ourselves by like redirecting our minds from all those catastrophizing thoughts, because when they happen, they kind of shut us down and make us feel useless and like helpless. And they don't help us in the present moment, which is like the only moment we have, right? Like, and so that's where my work is with my clients, is really just showing them the power that they have in any of these moments to bring themselves back. And like, yeah, like these are real decisions to be made for sure. Not going to sugarcoat that. And like, you can do that when when you're not in this elevated state.
Right. Right. I think those are all excellent points. And, I have a 26-year-old at the moment who has, moderate to severe autism and needs lifelong 24/7 care. Am I panicked about me dying? No. I mean, we do have a special needs trust. We do have a will. We do have a kind of a plan, but at the same time, I also know through this work, through going for a special needs trust and guardianship and all that stuff, I know that your money or some money can pay for people to manage Lucas's care after I'm gone. And, so there's people around, there's people that care about Lucas, and there's people that can be paid to make sure Lucas gets quick care. I can't control everything. That's the other thing as you're talking. So this is like so fascinating, but like you have no control over what things are going to be like in 20 years. You have no control when you're dead, how things are going to go. So you might as well just, enjoy the moments, enjoy the time, make some plans, definitely get a will. Definitely, if your child needs 24/7 care, get guardianship, get, all of those things in place, and know that there are kind people out there. There are good people out there. There are systems. Are they perfect? No. There's no crystal ball to look forward. There's no crystal ball to look backwards of what if I would have done this X, Y, and Z, blah, blah, blah. So I just, I literally could talk to you for hours on end.
Well,
because
we'll do it. Between my podcast and your podcast, we can do it. But it's like I like to tell like when my clients, it's like kicking the terrorist out of their brain, because here's the thing is like,
I love that.
Our brains, we are built, we have a negativity bias as part of our survival. Like Dr. Rick Hansen says, our brains are Teflon for the negative. I'm sorry, Velcro for the negative and Teflon for the positive, right? We look for the negative, and then we have that confirmation bias that comes in and just finds us all of the evidence of the things that we already believe. And then we're catastrophizing, and then we're doing all or nothing thinking. It's like I think negative thinking is like a gateway drug to all of these other like thought errors that like come in. And then they just become part of the way that we operate and the way that we think. And we think that that's just how it is. And we keep finding evidence of it. And so in my work with my clients, like I just like try to break that shit all apart. Like, okay, let's take a look at like what's really happening here. And so one of the first lessons that we talk about is like, what's the circumstance? And you'll know this from Brooke's model. Like, what is actually the circumstance, and what are all your thoughts about it? And what are those thoughts creating for you? Because you actually have some choice here about what you decide to think, how you decide to look at things. And that doesn't mean like you just have happy thoughts about everything, But it's also like, you don't have to go down these roads that you've been going down either. Like,
Right,
you do
right.
have a choice.
I love that. Kick the terrorists out of your brain. Love it. So you have a podcast. What's the name of the podcast?
The Autism Mom Coach.
The Autism Mom Coach. And you have a podcast. There's some great, we're not going to be able to cover any of the topics, but people can go there. You can see, you know, when you want your child to be normal, how to tell your child that they have autism. I mean, there's so many great topics. I'm going to definitely dive in, and Lisa and I are discussing me being on her podcast as well. And then you also provide, your main thing that you provide is one-to-one coaching. And that information about how you do that is all on your website at theautismmomcoach.com. So before I let you go, part of my podcast goals are for parents and professionals, not just to help the kids, but to help the parents and professionals be less stressed and lead happier lives. So, I mean, that's basically your whole.
That's my jam. That's my jam.
Thing.
Yeah.
But to sum it up, do you have any self-care or routines in your life to help you do that you would recommend to both parents and professionals?
Yeah. So I actually just did an episode on this, and it's already very a popular one. I've gotten a lot of feedback about it. It's called When Things Suck. And what really it's about is like when you're in it, like when you're just in it, like what are the little things, like at the very least things that you can do for yourself. And so, you know, as simple as it sounds, it really gets critical. Just taking the time to breathe on purpose, deep breaths in and deep breaths out, that actually signals to your nervous system that you are safe. That is a cue that you can, you know, for self-regulation. Another thing is sipping water, just drinking water and staying hydrated, because when your stress levels are up, you're producing more adrenaline and cortisol that dehydrates you. When your brain is dehydrated, it gets grumpy, you get a headache, right? And so it's like the little, like, you can do that, right? No matter what's happening, you can sip water, you can breathe. And so I always try to like take my clients back to like, what are your non-negotiables? Like, what can you do no matter what? I am a big fan of, whenever you can, of creating boundaries and saying no. My clients tell me it all comes on me. I'm the person. I'm responsible for everything. I do everything. It's like, okay, but what might you not be able to do? Like when somebody like offers to, like, you know, to do something for you, why not say yes to that? Why not cancel, like, you know, that appointment if you don't really want to go? It's like, where can you purposefully make time for yourself? Because again, that confirmation bias, it all falls on me. And then what I see is that my clients then take it all on, right? So like, you make it come true for yourself. And so I always like to talk to my clients about like, what can you let go of on purpose? Like, what can you say no to? Like, how can you say yes to yourself and then no to something else? Like, not in a adversarial kind of way, but like in a loving, supportive kind of way.
Yeah.
And then on this note of like self-care, I will be, by the time this podcast comes out, my free mini course will be out. It's going to be called Keeping Your, Keeping Your Cool During an Autism Meltdown. And I will teach my before, during, and after process. And throughout the framework, I'm teaching different self-care concepts and tools that parents can use at every stage of the framework in order to support themselves. So again, they are regulating themselves and then able to offer a co-regulating presence to their child.
Love it. And that will also be available at the website, the autismmomcoach.com.
Yes.
Cool. And Lisa also shared with me that her best friend's a BCBA. So she is very ABA friendly, and really, I think you're just a wealth of information. I'm so happy to have met you and had you on the show, and I would not be surprised if I have you back in the future. You have a wealth of information. So
yeah, we can coach
so
together.
Yeah.
I just do want to say about my best friend who's a BCBA. So I will offer this to all of you. When I have been at the height of it, when things have been the most intense in my house, you know, physically intense, just everything intense, I would always try to sort of like conjure up, like, what would my best friend do? what if she were in this house right now, not taking anything personally? What if she wasn't making my son's behaviors mean anything about her or her parenting? What if she wasn't thinking 20 years in the future? What would she do? I literally just try to bring that energy into my body to just down regulate me, because when we're in the moment, we're taking it personally, we're making it personal, our stress is going up, and we're meeting our kids where they are, and it's like we're in the death roll. And so she always would say to me, I would like tell her stories about him. She'd be like, "This is fascinating." And I'd be like, "I hate you, but you're not wrong. And I have something to learn from this. So I'm not going to hate on you. I'm not going to resent you," because I knew that she was saying it with love. So I'm going to bring in some of your energy. And that was life-saving for me and my son.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you have a great, great son, and you're doing an amazing job, not only to help your son, but to help other moms along the way. So thank you so much, Lisa
you.
Candera. We're going to chat in the future, I'm sure. Have a good one.
Definitely. Thanks so much, Mary.